Hello.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Streaming Tuesdays with Wisdom Way Center for Spirituality. I'm Marian Diaz.
And I'm Carly Swenson.
And today we're going to be exploring emotional flexibility. So just as we're starting, we'd invite you to go back and watch our 3 previous videos on consciousness. We did a little bit of an exploration of stillness, and we also did a little video on allowing. So today we're going to explore how we can sort of bring our emotions into integrating them in our spirituality.
Yeah, which is I have always been a more emotionally oriented person. So I know, especially for me, emotional flexibility is something I wish I would have understood and had introduced to me probably much sooner than my 30s. But
Yeah. So for me, really, spirituality at the core has a lot to do with how we're integrating all of these parts of ourselves into a whole. And so that's some of what we'll be doing in these live streams, is looking at kind of like the different pieces and figuring out how we can bring them into our whole selves. And so that's just to say, I think some of the pieces that we've already addressed can roll into emotional flexibility, because a lot of it just begins with giving yourself that space, allowing reality to be what it is, stepping back. For some people, it's just naming their emotions and identifying them, but just being like, first of all, even willing to have them.
Willing to have aware. Yeah, it is that, like, willing to step back and have awareness and be like, okay, so what is... this is what I'm feeling in my body. What does this mean? What are these feelings? And I think especially if it gets really overwhelming, if time feels chaotic, various challenges, you name it, I think that it provokes so many emotions at once that sometimes the idea of even stepping back sounds terrifying, like you're just going to be kind of washed or washed away, I guess, or overwhelmed by emotions if you're willing to let it in. So I don't know if you want to say anything on just like kind of those ways of not letting fear stop you from processing your emotions, of just like opening the door a little bit to kind of
And so it's interesting, because whereas you sort of said you started with just being like very emotionally oriented most of your life, I think I sort of was in the opposite way and grew up in sort of a family more where, I mean, I did have people very close to me who were very expressive of emotions. I'm thinking like of my grandfathers especially. But, it took some time as I was especially raising children to be like, oh, wait, wow. I didn't really learn to process all these emotions so well. And parenting, happily pushed, at least started to push me in that direction. So for me, it was more like exploring them. And one of the things, and in fact, I had this experience last night where it's just recognizing too that you can be overwhelmed by negative emotions, negative quote unquote, but you can also like last night it was overwhelm from like positive emotions too. And so you can even have that where you sort of become like it's, and where I see it is like, when is it interrupting you to the point that you're not moving in the direction you want to go? When you're becoming a little less sort of centered, or maybe not working in towards your goals or whatever. Like
you sort of lose the intentionality behind it, because you're just so swept up in the like positive or good of it. So I mean, just even, again, first of all, noticing, maybe naming them. One of the things that I've done over time is to really say, like, I have emotions. So it's one thing to sort of say, like, oh, I am angry. Like, and anger was one of the key ones I had to learn to deal with. I love it now. I do. Now I understand. But especially, I think women were so socialized that, like,
exactly.
Any anger is bad.
And I just know how to express it better. And but in terms of just sort of saying, instead of I am angry, right, like an identity thing, to say like I have anger. And even one step back is even like I see myself having anger. And not even being angry, right? So I'll do that frequently in different versions with different sort of like parts of myself, to just step back and just sort of like watch myself kind of from outside in a weird way, to give yourself that space. So that's one little trick.
Yeah, well, I do the similar thing of just like, oh, I'm really mad, and it's like, oh, I'm aware that I'm mad. I'm aware that I'm having thoughts and the more that you're just kind of like, oh, I am not this, and I think that huge separation of realizing that we're something so much more immense and complicated and interconnected within ourselves and ideas, as well as interconnected with other people. That emotions are more like signage, like they're more like directions that you should investigate to figure out what's bringing up this signal. And it's like, I'm angry because my boundaries are crossed. Oh, that should be addressed. And so instead of just dwelling in the anger, which can be very justified and frustrating and valid in and of itself for sure, but once you kind of make that space to be like, oh, I'm angry because of this, then you're able to use that energy in a way of like, okay, so how do I best reinforce these boundaries? How do I take time to just cool down or whatever? And it's so beautiful when you realize like, oh, emotions are signs, and I just have to like figure out what to follow. And it takes so much of that, I think, fear and mystery out of it of like, what if I just get, I know being someone with like depression, that it's always that like, well, if I let myself feel sad, what if I just get swept up into the sad forever?
Or stuck, right? Or like,
But I've learned just through years of like, it's a cycle, it's an ebb and flow, and there are going to be difficult times, but the more that I don't beat myself up for having that and just be like, no, sometimes you're going to be a little down, it makes it so much less scary to, so like I'm not scared of that component of myself and my own mental health, which has been very liberating as well, as far as emotional flexibility.
And you'll find yourself the more you get, and I like to, emotional flexibility in terms of adjusting, like riding the waves or whatever, but then also just strength too, right? Because sometimes you can get so emotionally flexible that you're basically a wet noodle, right? So we don't necessarily want that either, right? So like, I think even in terms of the way I exercise, like doing like strength building and then cardio, but then also doing like yoga and stretching, right? So how are you, like, I also think about how am I living this in my body, my physical body. And I think too, like you're saying, what are the signals telling me? How am I growing, and what am I learning from this, and what steps do I need to take based on it? And actually, it was just this experience last night was so interesting, because when I did eventually realize something was going on, which actually took a while for me. Like, it's funny how a positive thing took longer than a negative thing to work through.
Well, I think part of it too.
Yeah, it's so rare.
We're so in tune to notice the negative for like survival.
Exactly.
But,
Exactly. But then I was like, oh, it was that, and I realized what the experience was that had caused this, impact. But then it was like, oh, it was because that action was like, had the potential to work actually like a deep healing in me, which was really interesting. And then when I was like, oh, and then just like spent some time like letting that sit there, like, yeah, wow, oh, okay, and then thinking out like implications of that. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, because you have to also allow, right, those positive things for that change or that healing and to happen too. So that was really,
I think
cool.
It's more satisfying to make space and sit in that good and that healing, because I think that also gets kind of pushed aside and dismissed of like, why aren't you being productive? Spend your time on something good, like anxiety, I think we don't really give people that same way of like, no, sit with that, figure out what's blooming or getting melded together in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Nice.
Great, good, okay. Well, we'll have a little time together, a little silence. And just as we're starting this, maybe invite you to think about, call to mind and call into your body and your spirit some emotion. And maybe go light at this time, because we're just going to take 3 or 4 minutes here. And just something you felt in the last few days that you feel deserves more time to explore, to feel, experience. And then as we're going into the silence, just however you work, like maybe you bring it into a thought or an image a sound, maybe you actually go back to that experience a little bit if it's safe for you. And just sit with it. And so we'll start with our little gong, and then I'll call you out from this as well. So as we're starting, just get comfortable. Take a deep breath. Come into your body. Just call you out, invite you out of the silence as you're ready. So I have to say I had a moment starting that because I went back to where I almost cracked up within like the first 50, and I was like, okay, wait, no, this is professional. And if I was alone that I would have just started laughing because something popped into my brain.
But it does look kind of cringe, just like we're just sitting here with our eyes closed and one person just starts chuckling.
I know, and it's contagious. So, but I was like, when you don't, and that's the other piece to this. I mean, maybe we could explore at some point. Is like the sense of the group energy, even though it's the two of us, but then the people who are with us too, and feeling that and directing towards them. So, yeah. But
do you want to elaborate any more on your experience?
Well, yeah. So I did kind of go back to the experience and just sit with it. I was feeling, just really deep peace.
Oh, good.
Which is like my number one value and sort of identity. and like just amazement, like, oh wow, that's really cool.
I love that.
And it's something, and like relishing it or like savoring it, right? Yeah, really, really interesting. Yeah, and it's that experience, which was, well, it would have been a Monday night, and after having like this huge challenge over the weekend that I was dealing with emotionally. So it was like this really hard thing that I was managing, and then all of a sudden it like flipped later yesterday. Like it was just bizarre, and it wasn't even around that same issue, you know. Like that issue did kind of get dealt with and like resolve and stuff, but then on top of it, this other thing was really cool.
There's such a beauty in that, because it really is, you know, if you had asked you probably on Saturday, like, how do you think you're going to be feeling on, and you're probably like, awful. I'm going to feel awful. You know, like those things, when you open yourself to that stillness and the present, like you are able to kind of absorb more possibilities for things to kind of heal in ways that you might not expect. But there is something to that, just kind of keeping open to possibility, even if that doesn't feel like what you expect. As long as you kind of keep, you know, slowing down.